this morning with 4 passengers went through railroad track gates and hit a CSX freight train. The car was immediately incinerated, and the 4 people who were in the car perished. The car was transported here to the Harvey Police Department, where further investigation and the extrication process went through. 4 people in the car were identified, and they were identified as Jeremy Robinson, who was the driver, Xavier Moore, Taisha Rush, and Jada Moore. All 4 families have been notified, and the remains have been sent to the medical examiner's office. It's a terrible day here in Harvey, as is in the Southland. This accident actually occurred in Phoenix, our neighboring town. Right now, the investigation is complete, and we are turning over the paperwork to the Phoenix Police Department, who will finish up with the investigation in terms of the paperwork. Are there any questions from anyone?
Can you just talk a little bit about how the accident happened? The car approached, did it go through the gates and the gates up down?
Sure. From our investigation, we have noticed that the car was traveling down Halsted at 155th Street. It went through the gates that were down and functioning properly and hit the train that was going through the intersection at the time. The train was almost completely out of the intersection. In fact, the car hit the final car of the train. The train was a CSX freight train. It was 3 locomotives and 47 cars following the 3 locomotives. The final car was the car that was hit by the 2018 Dodge Durango.
Any evidence that the car was traveling at a high rate of speed?
There's no evidence of that, but the car did go through the gates and hit the train and immediately started on fire. So we don't have evidence, saying how fast the car was going at this point. That's something that the Illinois State Police could contribute if we want, but right now we know what happened. It's terrible that this happened. Kind of reminds us that how dangerous train intersections can be. That we have to be very cognizant of that and make sure you're looking and think safety at the train intersections.
Do we know where they were coming from and where they were going to?
We don't have that information. Right now, we've been focusing our operations is really finding out what happened at that intersection, at that train crossing. So,
because this was a train accident, any federal agencies getting involved?
CSX is working with the Federal Railroad Administration as part of standard protocol, but that's kind of their end of the deal. They're going to pursue that. I'm sure the Federal Railroad Administration will also be contacting the Phoenix Police Department just to kind of wrap things up. So,
Jason, do you know if the victims were residents of Harvey or were they residents of Phoenix?
Sure. They were none of the victims were residents of Harvey. Xavier was from Chicago. Jeremy was from Riverdale. Tyasha was from Chicago, as well as Jada. So 3 were from Chicago and 1 was from Riverdale.
Taisha, how does she spell her name?
Tieasha Rush, Rush.
And what town does she live in again?
She's in Chicago.
Chicago, okay. Is there any evidence at all that maybe a truck driver called
Yeah, at this point we don't know. There was a pretty bad fire. It was a pretty rough situation. Coming back here, and the extrication was over an hour long. So the car was in pretty rough shape, as you probably have seen on some of the news coverages this morning. So, some of that evidence would be really hard to find. So,
the toxicology test done by the...
that's all done at the purview of the medical examiner's office. I can't comment on that, but I'm sure they'll have that information at a later date.
I believe I was told there was a person who flagged down police. Did that individual witness the accident, or did the individual just see the fire that followed?
I don't have that information. I know that person saw the car on fire and stopped a nearby Phoenix police officer. That's how we received notification at the Harvey Police Department. Phoenix PD called us and told us of a car on fire at that intersection, at which time Harvey PD and Harvey Fire were immediately dispatched. They responded to the scene within 2 minutes of the notification. So they were quick to respond. Unfortunately, they approached a scene that was in pretty grave shape. So.
Do you know, have there been any other accidents involving cars and trains at this particular intersection?
You know what? I'm sorry, I don't know that's a pretty quiet train intersection. It's not a metro station. It's only freight trains. So I've never heard of one. However, I'm new here, so I'm not really sure that there's a history. In just conversations, it was a little shocking to a lot of people that the accident happened over there. So it would make me think that that's not very common to have any kind of issues over there.
And maybe just if you can talk a little bit again about, we don't know if they were trying to beat the train or what their motivation was for going through the gates, but you just got to be careful.
Absolutely. And we're looking at the situation after it happened, and there's no way for us to know the motivation of someone driving a car and what they're doing. It's just sad that we're sitting here today and there's 4 people in their 20s and 30s, who aren't going home today because of that. So, the police department has done a fantastic job investigating. The fire department, I asked you guys to think about the families. I asked you guys to think about the police and fire who had to witness this accident this morning, because it was a pretty horrific accident.
Do your guys get any kind of counseling? What's the program?
Absolutely. So there's something called critical incident stress debriefing. That's standard protocol in a situation like this. So I just talked to the deputy chief of the police department, and he was working on making sure that the officers who were on scene, as well as talking to the deputy chief of the fire department, to make sure that any of the officers who wanted to get into some kind of counseling that would be available to them. So.
Very random question, but earlier I'd been interested enough to know if anything had happened to the train, if it was knocked off of the tracks, if the train even knew it was.
Sure. The train, from our knowledge, the train did not stop because they didn't know about it for a little bit. It hit the end of the train, the back of the train, or the final car. The conductors are in the first car. A 50 car train is pretty long. If you just think about it distance-wise. So they were notified, but at the actual time that the train kept on going. So
When did they stop? How long?
I don't know that answer. So, yeah,
Are they stopped?
no. So.
Just, I guess, your message to the Harvey community on this that it's a tragic day.
Absolutely, and I know I've spoken with the mayor. I've spoken with the deputy chief of both the police and fire department, and it's a sad day in Harvey. And anytime anyone dies in our community, whether they're residents or visitors or passerbys, we share in the grief. So it's sad to see 4 young people pass this morning, and our thoughts and prayers are going out to all of their families. And we're just constantly reminded of making sure that we try to build a safer community here in Harvey. We're working real hard to do that, and I think that's something that the residents and passerbys and community members also have to think about. There's a very train intersections are very dangerous. There's a lot of, you just have to be out there and pay attention and cognizant. So, question? All right, thank you all.
Everybody's cameras, are they on? Okay, now you
Can I do a dance?